Good evening, lovers of history and the world's strange turning points. Tonight we follow a road that looks ordinary, 30 miles of Missouri countryside, but in 1904 it became a laboratory for ambition, prejudice, spectacle, and very bad sports science. It begins in St. Louis, where the Louisiana Purchase Exposition hums like a giant engine. Electric bulbs glitter above plaster palaces. Brass bands leak through warm night air. The smell is roasted peanuts, horse sweat, and coal smoke. Visitors arrive by streetcar and on foot, dazzled and exhausted, ready to believe that America's new century will be faster, taller, louder than anything Europe can offer. The Olympic marathon is supposed to crown that promise with a simple human truth: one body, one road, one finish. But the road is not simple. It is unpaved, rutted, and shared with wagons and motorcars. It is July. The heat sits on the tongue like tin. And the Olympics here are not yet a sacred institution. They're an attraction folded into a World's Fair timetable, competing with balloon ascents, exotic villages, and the daily mathematics of ticket sales. Across the Atlantic, the games were meant for Chicago, then shifted, then absorbed by the fair. Many European teams simply stay home. Travel is expensive, time-consuming, and a little humiliating when the event feels like a sideshow. On race morning, runners pin numbers to shirts already stiff with sweat. A starter checks his watch while flies worry the horses nearby. A few spectators squint into the bright haze and ask each other, not entirely sure. So this is the Olympics? James E. Sullivan, the fair's sport director, carries a private fear. If the crowd is bored, the nation is embarrassed. Give them a show, he tells himself, or they'll remember us as second-rate. Nearby, officials talk about proving endurance, about control, about what bodies should be allowed to represent civilization. By afternoon, that dusty road will turn the marathon into something closer to a fever dream than a race, and the modern world will be watching itself being invented. The starting pistol is already being loaded. Dawn in St. Louis arrives sticky and already loud. Milk wagons clatter over cobbles. In boarding houses near the fairgrounds, men wash in basins that never quite feel cool. The city is modern enough to boast electric lights, but old enough that a long drink of clean water is still a small luxury. The marathon course leaves the spectacle behind and heads into the county. Out there, the road is a pale ribbon of crushed stone and dirt, macadam, they call it. Good for horses, brutal for lungs. Each passing wagon lifts a beige cloud that hangs in the air like flour. A motor car, rare but proud, spits oily exhaust and adds its own sharp smell to the dust. Along the edges, sunburned farmers lean on fences, listening to cicadas and wondering why anyone would run for sport when there is work to do. Organizers choose this route for a reason that sounds practical and feels theatrical. Hills make good drama. They also choose a start time that flatters the fair schedule, not the runner's physiology. Water stations are few, partly because hauling water is inconvenient, and partly because some officials believe thirst is useful, an honest test, a natural restraint on the unruly body. In a small room near the start, a runner tightens his shoes and tastes metal in his mouth. He thinks of the word amateur the way a man thinks of a church rule, important, but written by people who don't share his hunger. If I win, he worries, will they call me noble? Or will they call me a cheat for needing the prize? Dr. Charles Lucas, one of the medical men hovering around the event, is torn between curiosity and conscience. If we measure them at the edge, he thinks, we learn what endurance really is. But another part of him hears the dry rasp of a lung and wonders what the edge will cost. By the time the sun clears the rooftops, the course is set, the dust is waiting, and the idea of a clean, noble race is already slipping. The first mile will decide what kind of day this really is. If you want to understand why the 1904 marathon turned strange, you have to walk the fairgrounds first. Under the tall flags and fresh paint, the exposition is a map of power. You can buy a lemonade. Then, a few steps later, pay to stare at people presented as types from overseas. Colonial subjects arranged like living postcards. Drums, shouted patter, and the sweet burn of popcorn mingle with a quieter smell of varnish and wet straw. The Olympics arrive inside this machinery. Events are stretched across months, folded between concerts and parades. Rules shift. Schedules change. The idea is less global fellowship and more proof of progress, with medals as marketing. For many Americans, sport is becoming a civic language, a way to talk about vigor, discipline, and the nation's place on the world stage. Sullivan understands that language. He also feels its darker temptation. If our men win, he thinks, it says something about our future. Not just about training, but about hierarchy. That summer, the fair hosts so-called anthropology days, inviting indigenous and colonized peoples to compete in staged contests meant to confirm racist assumptions. The atmosphere seeps into everything, even when officials pretend it doesn't. Among the marathon entrants are two Tswana men from South Africa, brought to St. Louis as part of the fair's displays. They train in borrowed time, watched by strangers who do not bother to learn their names. One of them carries an inward dread, less about losing, more about being laughed at while running in a country that treats him like an exhibit. In the press tent, reporters sharpen pencils and imagine headlines. A good story, they know, can sell the fair better than any brochure. And the marathon, long, punishing, unpredictable, promises a story even before it begins. By late morning, the runners gather, the crowd thickens, and the fair's noisy worldview funnels down to one dusty starting line. The race is about to inherit the age's illusions. The afternoon of August 30th, 1904, hot enough that the air itself seems to press back. On the fairgrounds, spectators fan themselves with programs. Horses twitch their skins, flies won't give up. At the start, runners stand in a loose line, shoulders shiny with sweat, numbers pinned to cotton. Someone rubs liniment onto calves, and the sharp medicinal scent cuts through the dust. There are only a few dozen men, many from the United States and Canada, because the trip to St. Louis is a small expedition. One runner, a Cuban postman named Felix Carvajal, has arrived after a long, messy journey and some bad luck with money. He wears street clothes, long trousers, a shirt, a cap, and smiles like a man trying to turn embarrassment into charm. Inside, though, he carries a stubborn pride. They may look at me like a joke, he thinks, but my legs don't know their laughter. Officials review the plan. A course marked by flags, a handful of water stops, and plenty of open road where wagons and cars may pass. Some of this is negligence. Some is philosophy. Dr. Lucas wants to observe dehydration like a scientist observing a storm. He tells himself it's for knowledge, but a quieter voice asks whether the runners consented to being measured this way. A pistol cracks. The sound is small, swallowed quickly by heat. Feet thud into dust, and immediately a pale cloud rises, curling around ankles and turning lungs into filters. Ahead of the pack, an automobile carrying judges lurches forward to pace the race. One official grips the door and thinks, with a flicker of shame, we're choking them with our own progress. But the car keeps going, and the dust keeps blooming behind it. Sunlight flashes off the hood like a warning mirror. In the first mile, the race still looks like sport, rhythm, breath, intention. But beyond the fair's edge, the road is waiting with its own rules, and it will enforce them without mercy. The day is just beginning to show its teeth, mile by mile now. A few miles out, the city noise fades and you hear the countryside. Cicadas drilling in the trees, a distant hammer on a barn roof, the gravel crunch under thin shoes. The runners spread out, each man finding his own private pace in a moving fog of dust. When a wagon passes, it's like a sandstorm arriving on schedule, dust settling on lips like chalk. Carvajal drifts toward the edge of the road where a small group of locals stands near an orchard fence. The air smells of bruised fruit and sun-warmed wood. He grins, makes a little bow, and says something in Spanish that no one fully understands, but everyone enjoys. Someone offers him fruit, and he eats with the calm satisfaction of a man who has traveled too far to refuse kindness. He even pauses to chat, as if the marathon is a neighborhood visit. A mile later, bothered by the heat, he begins to fuss with his clothing. With a small blade, he trims his trousers into rough shorts, half to cool his legs, half to reclaim dignity. Behind him, the two Tswana runners meet a different welcome. A dog breaks free from a yard and charges, barking, teeth flashing white. Another joins it, One of the men feels his heart jump, not from exertion, but from the old instinct to escape harm when you are far from home and no one is obliged to protect you. Run, he thinks. Not for glory, run to stay unbitten. The dogs snap at heels until the men sprint into open ground, losing time but gaining distance. Officials in their pacing car glimpse the scene in the mirror and offer no help. The race, in this worldview, is a test that should not be softened. And yet every test here is uneven. Some runners are cheered, some mocked, some chased by animals like intruders. By the time the course bends toward the first long rise, the marathon has already stopped being one story. It has become many stories colliding in the same dust. Soon the heat will turn those stories into consequences. As the miles lengthen, the race begins to peel men off the road. Some slow to a walk, then to a stagger. Others stop under trees, hands on knees, dust caked to sweat until their faces look powdered. The sun has no mercy, and the little breeze that exists arrives from behind, carrying more grit. Even the birds are quiet, as if conserving breath. In this thinning field, a New Yorker named Fred Lors surges forward. He is a bricklayer by trade, used to hauling weight, used to pain. For a while he looks like the clean story the fair wants, an American out front, the crowd's future already written. Inside, though, he worries about the same thing every working man worries about, being made foolish in public. Don't let them see you break, he tells himself, and he pushes. Around mile 9, his body answers back. Cramps bite his legs like clamps. The road tilts, the air shimmers, and he is suddenly aware of how far 26 miles actually is. A passing automobile slows, one of the official vehicles trailing the race, and Lors makes a decision that will stain the afternoon. He climbs in, partly to rest, partly to escape the humiliation of dropping out in full view. The seat is hot, the gasoline smells sharp, and the speed feels like salvation. An official in the car's wake sees the pickup and feels a brief panic. If I protest, he thinks, I spoil the show. If I stay silent, I spoil the games. He chooses silence, telling himself the road will sort it out. Later, when the cramps ease, Lors steps out and begins running again. In his mind it is a comic detour, not a crime. I was only catching my breath, he thinks, and the crowd wants a winner. But rules, even messy ones, exist for a reason, and the finish line is a theater that punishes improvisation. As the automobile carries him closer to the stadium, word ripples ahead, the leader is coming. Spectators rise, officials glance at each other, and the day prepares to crown the wrong man. The confusion is almost ready to become official. Farther back on the road, another kind of drama is unfolding, quieter, more medical, almost intimate. Thomas Hicks, a British-born runner racing for the United States, moves with a stubborn, economical gait. His mouth is so dry his tongue feels too large. Dust has pasted itself to his sweat in gray streaks. Each inhale scrapes. Hicks is surrounded by helpers on bicycles, and in a support car, men with stopwatches and bottles. In 1904, sports medicine is not yet a discipline. It is a tangle of folk wisdom, chemistry, and bravado. America is swimming in patent tonics and miracle cures, sold in bright glass and bold type. Regulation is thin. Confidence is thick. Dr. Lucas has an idea, an experiment, really. Small doses of strychnine, a poison, have been used in tiny quantities as a stimulant. Combine that with brandy, and perhaps you can wake a failing athlete the way a slap wakes a fainting man. One of Hicks's handlers hesitates with the vial in his hand, reading the tiny label in the harsh light. He can smell the alcohol as the cork comes free. If I don't give it, he thinks, we lose. If I do, I might kill him. Hicks, half delirious but still proud, whispers the motive that drives so many athletes in this era of proving grounds. I came to win. He swallows what they offer, strychnine mixed with brandy, later egg whites to settle his stomach, and the bitterness sits at the back of his throat like a warning. For a moment his eyes sharpen, as if the world has been turned up in brightness. The course offers little relief. Water is rationed. Officials want the men thirsty to test them. At one stop, a runner reaches for a cup and is waved away, the gesture casual, almost bureaucratic. The sun keeps pressing down, and the road keeps rising and falling like a slow torture device. Hicks continues, pulled forward by chemistry, pride, and the sheer momentum of the day. But every stimulant is also a loan, and the body always collects its debts. The next miles will show what it means to borrow against survival. By mid-course, the marathon stops looking like a race and starts looking like a chain of small emergencies. The leading automobile has done its work too well. The air along the road is a suspended haze. Men cough, not politely, but with the harsh barking of lungs trying to clear grit. Sweat runs into eyes and turns the world into a blinking blur. One runner swears he sees a lake ahead, then realizes it's only sunlight on pale stone. Some runners search for water the way lost travelers do. A man drops to a knee beside a shallow stream and drinks with both hands, ignoring the muddy taste. It is warm, almost metallic, but it is something. Another accepts a sponge from a spectator and presses it to his mouth, sucking moisture like a child. A volunteer at a rare water stop watches cups disappear and feels a moral tremor. If I give extra, he thinks, I disobey the officials. If I follow orders, I watch men suffer for a theory. Carvajal pays for his earlier hospitality. The fruit sits heavy, and at one point he bends over with cramps, the smell of ferment and dust rising together. He steps off the road into shade and, in one account that has the ring of exhausted truth, lies down briefly, more a collapse than a nap. When he stands again, he grins at his own mistake, but the minutes are gone. Far ahead, word keeps circulating like gossip in a small town. Someone is leading, someone has dropped out, someone has cheated, someone has nearly died. The crowd at the stadium does not see the road. It sees only the idea of a finish, and that idea is hungry. A judge wipes his forehead, looks down the course, and feels the pressure of a nation that wants a clean conclusion. We need a winner, he thinks, not a mess. But the mess is already built into the day's design. As the sun lowers slightly, shadows stretch across the ruts, and the runners who remain are now moving through a landscape of rumors and thirst. The stadium gates are waiting, and so is the next mistake. Inside Francis Field, the stadium air is thick with expectation and stale summer heat. Spectators shift on wooden benches. A band tests a few notes, brass gleams. Dust from the roads has followed people in on their clothes, so even the grandstand smells faintly of earth. The track itself gives off a green, cut grass scent that promises order. A shout rises near the entrance tunnel. The leader is coming. Fred Lors appears at the track, jogging in with a practiced wave, smiling broadly as if he has been chased by glory all afternoon. The crowd roars, because crowds often roar first and ask questions later. Officials lean forward. Someone rushes out with flowers. For a brief, shining moment, the fair gets its picture. A confident winner, an American face, a clean ending that can be printed and sold. But Lors's smile has a crack in it. He tastes the lie the way he tasted dust, inescapable. Maybe they'll never know. A small part of him hopes. Another part whispers, they always know. On the infield, a spectator who saw the automobile ride speaks up. Then another. The story spreads faster than any runner, and the mood shifts. Applause turns to a confused murmur, then to something sharper. Sullivan feels the danger instantly. Not the danger to Lors, but to the event. This cannot be our headline, he thinks, watching the wreath wilt in the athlete's hands. An official confronts Lors. The charade collapses in plain sight. Lors protests, half joking, as if humor can soften rules. It can't. He is disqualified, and the stadium is left holding an empty victory. For the crowd, the strangest part is not the cheating. It's how quickly certainty evaporates. The finish line has become a question mark. Somewhere out on that dusty road, the real race is still happening, and the man who will truly arrive is in far worse condition than any triumphant photograph can admit. The band falls quiet. Eyes turn again to the tunnel. The next runner to appear will not be waving at all. When Thomas Hicks finally comes into view of the stadium, he is no longer simply running. He is being managed, like a failing machine kept alive by hands and will. His skin has turned a dull, ashen color beneath a crust of dust. His eyes have a glassy, faraway focus. The world, for him, has narrowed to the next step and the next breath. On the last miles, his handlers have given him more stimulant, again that tiny, dangerous measure of strychnine with brandy, because the body they are trying to propel is slipping away. Hicks can taste the alcohol and feel his stomach revolt. He wants water with a childlike intensity, but water is treated like a bargaining chip, offered in teaspoons. If I drink, he thinks, I might vomit. If I don't, I might vanish. It is not a noble dilemma. It is a human one. The road behind him is littered with dropped hats, abandoned shoes, men sitting in ditches with their heads in their hands. But the system only records finishers and failures. A doctor following Hicks watches the tremor in his limbs and feels a cold prickle of fear. I wanted data, he thinks, not a corpse on the track. Yet the momentum of the event, crowd, schedule, reputation, pushes forward like a tide. At the stadium gate, the noise hits Hicks like a wall. Cheers, confusion, the band trying to recover its rhythm. Hicks sways. His handlers put hands under his arms, steering him onto the track. Heat shimmers above the cinder track. The crowd smells of cigars and sweat. Hicks feels the hands holding him, and a flash of shame cuts through the fog. If they carry me, he thinks, is it still mine? He is, in the strictest sense, upright. He is also, in the truest sense, collapsing. With the finish line only a lap away, the Olympics in St. Louis reveal what they have become, not a clean contest, but a performance stitched together from desperation, pride, and improvisation. Hicks is moving toward the tape, and no one is sure what will reach it first, his body or the consequences. Hicks makes the final turn as if wading through deep water. His feet scuff the track. His head lolls. Two men flank him so closely their shoulders nearly touch his ribs, ready to catch him when, inevitably, he folds. In the grandstand, people shout his name, though many learned it only seconds ago. The sound arrives to Hicks like it's coming through a closed door. The tape stretches across the lane, white against the dark cinders. When Hicks breaks it, there is a burst of relief that feels almost political. At last, a winner who is not an embarrassment. Someone raises his arm for him. A photographer leans in, and the click of a camera is oddly crisp in the heat. Then the bill comes due. Hicks collapses, his body finally refusing the bargain. His handlers lower him to the ground. His lips are cracked, his pulse wild. Doctors crowd around, smelling brandy on his breath, seeing the tight, unnatural alertness that poison can bring. Hicks tastes iron and bile and tries to speak, but only a rasp comes out. One physician thinks, with a sick twist of responsibility, we pushed him into a place the human body does not belong. And he knows it. They work to cool him, to keep him conscious, to make sure that victory does not become a fatal footnote. Officials begin recording the result, already shaping the narrative. It will be said that the marathon proved courage. It will not be said, at least not loudly, that the event nearly proved how easily courage can be exploited. In the stands, some spectators clap, then stop, uncertain whether applause fits a man who looks more rescued than triumphant. Outside the stadium, other runners still stumble toward the finish, each with his own private disaster. Inside, the organizers breathe for the first time all afternoon, and then remember the first winner who arrived waving. The day has produced a champion, yes. It has also produced questions that will not stay politely buried, and they are already walking toward the microphones. After Hicks is carried away, the finish line keeps doing its quiet work. One by one, men appear from the tunnel looking older than when they left. Their shoes are white with dust, their eyes are red. Their mouths hang open as if they've forgotten how to close them. The crowd, having spent its loudest energy on the wrong winner and the near-dead winner, watches now with a softer, uneasy curiosity. Second place goes to Albert Corey, a French-born runner living in the United States, an emblem of the era's moving people. He crosses with the contained seriousness of a man who wants to be accepted. If I place well, he thinks, maybe they'll stop calling me foreign. Behind him comes Arthur Newton, a South African who knows, in his bones, how empire can move a person across oceans and then judge him for where he lands. And yes, Carvajal eventually arrives, still smiling, still a little theatrical, as if humor is his last intact muscle. His earlier pauses have cost him, but he finishes high enough to make the crowd laugh and applaud in the same breath. The Tswana runners arrive too, their faces unreadable, bodies marked by the day's dust and its small cruelties. There is no ceremony grand enough to repair what it meant for them to run here. In the officials' box, pencils scratch. Results are finalized. In a nearby medical room, the air is thick with liniment and damp towels, and you can hear a man retching behind a curtain. Already the fair's press men are deciding which details to hide and which to polish. We can't sell chaos, one thinks, but we can sell endurance. It is a familiar instinct, what modern viewers would call PR, except here it's written with ink and telegraph clicks. Yet some truths resist polishing. Too many people saw Lohr's wave. Too many people saw Hicks collapse. The marathon has delivered an ending, but not closure. And outside the stadium, the question that matters most is beginning to form. What, exactly, did we just celebrate, really? In the days after the race, the heat lifts, but the embarrassment does not. Meetings are held in rooms that smell of cigar smoke and ink. Men in suits sit at long tables, fanning themselves with agendas. Outside the windows, the fair continues. Music, lights, crowds, pretending the marathon was only another attraction safely passed. The Lohr's affair is handled first because it is simple. A man rode in a car. He is disqualified. Then, in a gesture that reveals how much officials still value the appearance of good faith, later allowed back into competition after claiming it was a joke. The system wants to punish and forgive in the same breath, because harshness risks admitting the event was poorly supervised. Hicks is harder. Was it acceptable for handlers to hold him up? Was it acceptable to feed him stimulants, strychnine and brandy, on the road? In 1904, there is no modern anti-doping code, no standardized medical ethics for sport, and very little agreement about where help ends and cheating begins. Dr. Lucas considers writing up his observations. He feels the familiar scientist's pull. If we learn something, he thinks, it should be shared. But he also senses the public mood. Published too honestly, and he could hand critics a weapon. Behind these arguments is a larger struggle. The Olympic movement is young, fragile, and easily swallowed by local agendas. The St. Louis Games are stretched across months, tangled with the fair's racism, its commercial logic, its need to flatter national pride. The marathon becomes the unavoidable proof that without clear governance, global sport can be bent into whatever a host city wants. A clerk gathers testimony, pages rustling like dry leaves. A reporter waits by the door, hungry for quotes. And somewhere, quietly, future organizers are taking notes, not out of virtue, but out of fear. They have seen what happens when a finish line is built on improvisation. The turning point is not a single decision. It is the realization, shared by embarrassed men with official stamps, that the Olympics cannot survive as a sideshow forever. The next games will inherit that realization, and they will try to act on it. When the fair finally closes, the plaster palaces begin to look tired. Flags come down. The Midway's bright noise thins into the ordinary sounds of a city returning to work. On the marathon road, dust settles back onto weeds and fence posts, as if trying to erase the footprints that made it famous. But stories do not settle so easily. Newspapers replay the day in fragments. The cheering crowd fooled by a waving winner. The champion who had to be held upright. The men who drank from streams. The dog chase that sounded like a joke until you imagine teeth closing on skin. For many readers, it's simply a bizarre anecdote. For organizers, it's a warning. Pierre de Coubertin, the French baron who helped revive the modern Olympics, is not the star of this tale, but his irritation matters. He worries, quietly, then more openly, that the games can be swallowed by local spectacle. If this becomes a fair attraction, he thinks, it will lose its soul. American officials, meanwhile, feel their own tension. They want international legitimacy, but they also want to run things their way, on their schedule, for their crowd. The response over the following years is gradual, uneven, and driven as much by embarrassment as by ideals. Future marathons are better managed, clearer courses, more control over traffic, more attention to water and medical care. The Olympics slowly learn that you cannot ask bodies to perform heroism while treating them as props. And yet the legacy is not only administrative. The 1904 marathon shows how easily sport can mirror the structures around it: commerce, empire, race science, publicity. It is a reminder that fairness is not a natural condition. It is built, defended, and sometimes ignored. Even now, still, When we watch athletes under bright lights and careful branding, we are not so far from St. Louis. The difference is mostly the polish. The question remains, waiting for the next race. What are we really testing when we test endurance? Imagine the stadium after the crowd leaves. The benches creak as people stand and file out. Paper programs lie crushed underfoot. Somewhere, a janitor drags a broom across the cinders, raising a small puff of dust that looks, for a second, like the marathon returning in miniature. Outside, the evening air finally cools, and the city smells of river water and streetcar sparks. A lone mosquito finds your wrist. Thomas Hicks survives, but the victory sits oddly on the tongue. In the hours after the finish, he is a man being watched by doctors, by officials, by reporters who want a simple sentence. He may feel pride, but he also carries a dim, physical memory of being steered like a puppet. Did I win? He might wonder in the quiet. Or did we force a win into existence? It is the kind of question that doesn't fit in a headline. Fred Loers goes home with a different kind of lesson, that crowds can lift you and drop you in the same afternoon. Carvajal returns to the world of work and travel, his absurd, charming run preserved mostly as a story people tell to lighten the room. The Tswana runners fade into the fair's larger silence, another reminder that history often keeps the spotlight where power prefers it. And the organizers? They move on to the next event, the next schedule, the next chance to control the narrative. Yet even Sullivan, master of spectacle, must have felt a private unease when he remembered the road. Unmanaged traffic, rationed water, medical experiments on the move. If this is progress, he might think, why does it look so much like risk? The 1904 marathon endures because it shows the Olympics before they learned to hide their seams. It lets us see how an era's faith in science, in publicity, in hierarchy, can leak into something as simple as running. On that Missouri road, history did not arrive with a speech. It arrived with dust in the throat. And somewhere, in the next strange turning point, another starting pistol is waiting to be loaded.